Welcome to the show, everyone. It's the Crypto Lark. Today I have with me Kain from Havven. Kain, welcome.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, pleasure to have you on. Now, stablecoins are super interesting to me, and obviously with the situation around Tether and stuff, which we'll get into a bit later, stablecoins are so necessary in this market, especially considering the volatility. Can you give us the elevator pitch? What is Havven in particular doing?
So Haven is a on-chain collateral approach to a stablecoin. So we believe that having collateral back in the stablecoin is going to be the simplest approach, which is not too dissimilar to Tether. It's just a different type of collateral. The big difference between us and most of the other stablecoins, though, is that we use transaction fees to stabilize the system. So it's more like a payment network that you might be used to, like an American Express or a PayPal.
Mm-hmm. And that, I guess, kind of leads me into the first really exploratory question of how Haven works. You guys have a two token model. Can you break that down for us?
So it's not as complex as people kind of believe it to be sometimes. But essentially, you've got a collateral token, and that collateral token is the token that allows you to participate in the network. It allows you to lock that up and issue stablecoins against it. So when you issue those stablecoins, people can transact. So NUSD, which is our stablecoin, our initial stablecoin, people transact in NUSD. Those transactions generate fees, and the fees are paid to the collateral token holders, the Haven token holders, who provide the stability for the system.
Mm-hmm. And so those fees are paid out in NUSD.
Correct. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's a great system. So if I'm a Haven token holder, essentially I'm receiving fees for issuing out these tokens all the time.
Correct. Yeah. So you're providing stability. You're locking up your value. You're locking up collateral, and therefore the people who are getting utility from the stable coins from the payment network are paying you for providing that service, essentially.
And now, what about the instability of the market? I mean, obviously the nomin's one thing, but what about the Haven coin itself? As it rises and falls in value, how can I issue out certain amounts of nomins versus a coin that goes up and down? And what's the process around the issuance of that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So obviously, the Haven token is traded in the market. It has, the normal crypto volatility that you would expect. And so in order to buffer against price changes, price shifts in the market, we only allow people to issue about 20% of the value of their collateral tokens in stablecoins. So what that does is provides that 80% buffer so that even if the price drops by, say, 80%, the value of the stablecoins in circulation will be maintained. And while the price is dropping, there are mechanisms which incentivize Haven holders to reduce the supply of stablecoins that are in the market to try and bring it back into equilibrium as the price is dropping. So we want to incentivize people to maintain that collateralization ratio of around 20%.
Okay, and is that process of trying to maintain the stability, is that automated, or do I have to kind of, if I'm a Haven holder, do I have to kind of pop into my wallet every day and see how close I am to the ideal number?
So it will be automated in the sense that you can, set and forget using our interface. But we expect that there'll be sophisticated market makers and players in the space that will either build their own algorithms or have their own strategies for how to take advantage of that. And that competition between those people for the fees will be what generates, different strategies and therefore more stability.
Nice. So if I'm just, an average dude and I've got a couple thousand Haven tokens, I can just set it and forget it. But if I'm a massive institution who wants to be a maker, so to speak, in the space,
Yeah.
then we can actually do our own thing too.
Correct. Yeah, exactly right. You can do either one of those.
Nice, nice. That makes it really good for the average guy who can just set it and forget it and not have to worry about
Exactly.
chasing it around and all these things. So that's really cool. Okay, awesome. So this model, set and forget it sounds pretty easy. So that's really great. But you know, Tether, you just buy it and use it. You don't have to worry about any kind of backing or anything like this. Do you think that this model might be too complex for people to use, or what's kind of the how are you planning on overcoming that barrier of people having to move things around and
I think if you look at Tether and the side of Tether that we represent by the collateral tokens, that's kind of their institutional banking relationship. So that's moving the money around between institutional buyers who are depositing Swift transfers, etc. The average Tether user is not exposed to any of that complexity. There's a whole bunch of complexity behind the Tether system that they don't see. So in our case, the average holder of havens obviously sees that complexity, which makes it a little bit harder. But the stablecoin user doesn't see that. They just see that they've got a stablecoin that they can transact. So, we have a view that NUSD and Tether, DAI, various other stablecoins should be as easy to use as possible for the user. The people who are participating in the collateralization side should have a level of sophistication that's, I guess, a little bit higher.
Yeah, absolutely. That's completely understandable. And I think for the majority of people, they'll be exposed to the nomin tokens, not to the actual Haven tokens, unless they're interested in, of course, making those fees and getting that residual
Absolutely.
income from holding on to the tokens, which is, of course, really cool. Tether. What do you think about the allegations against Tether? Do you think it's a systemic risk for the cryptocurrency ecosystem?
I think Tether is really interesting because my view is that it is fully collateralized. But my view, and I've spoken to various people. I actually spoke to Phil Potter at Consensus. So I'm really confident that Tether is actually collateralized. The issue that people think they see with Tether is not the actual issue that Tether has. The issue that Tether has is that it is a centralized system. So there's a central point of failure. So irrespective of whether or not it's fully collateralized, whether all the money's there, whether people can access it, there's a risk that someone could, whether it's a government or some malicious actor, come in and do something that is significantly, detrimental to the system, which could cause it to collapse. And that's something that in crypto, we really shouldn't be exposing ourselves to. We obviously do. We do it with centralized exchanges. We do it with a whole bunch of things that are, I guess, conveniences that we deal with, right? And at the moment, Tether, given that there isn't an alternative, is probably the best solution to this problem of stablecoins, right? But our goal, as a stablecoin, a decentralized stablecoin, is to replace this centralized model in the same way that DEXs are trying to replace centralized exchanges, and it's a long path to get there. But the goal ultimately is to have decentralized systems. That's what we're all trying to do.
I find it really compelling, actually. It's a really interesting point of view on Tether, but you're absolutely right about the centralization issues, that decentralized verification on the blockchain, all that stuff's really important. And that's what Haven offers, actually. Everything is verifiable, all the fees, all the transactions, the issuance, all these different things. That's all on the blockchain. People can go and verify that. So that is a really massive chip in the favor of you guys over at Haven. I want to expand out though a little bit past Tether. How do you compare with some of the other projects out there, and what makes your solution more compelling than those other projects? Let's say, for example, MakerDAI or Digix, for example, basis.
Sure. So I think there are probably three broad categories of stablecoins. You've got off-chain collateral, of which Tether is the most well-known, and in my view will probably remain the most well-known. I don't think that the Tether clones, if you will, or the people who are trying to replace Tether with more transparent versions of Tether are necessarily going to be that successful. I think Tether has carved out a niche in that area that's going to be very hard to sort of take over. Then you've got on-chain collateral, so Maker and us. And then the third category are algorithmic solutions. So attempting to essentially manage the supply such that the price remains stable. So on the algorithmic side, they're obviously very interesting, but I think from a practical standpoint, maybe a little bit further away from, sort of being ready for the market, if you will. And obviously Basis and Carbon and there's a few others are working on this, but I think it's a really much more complex problem than people realize. So our view is that an on-chain collateral solution is going to be by far the fastest way to get to market. So already we have Maker, and then we're probably about 3 weeks away from launch. So the 11th of June, we're launching NUSD. And the big differentiator between us and Maker is that because we charge fees, we can use those fees to accelerate the scalability of the network. So Maker has been on mainnet for about 5 months now, and they have around 35 million in circulating currency. So that's obviously not enough to take on Tether.
No, not even
Tether has
close. Doesn't even,
no,
not even a
exactly right.
drop in the
Yeah.
bucket.
So Tether has 2.5 billion, right? So you need to have in the hundreds of millions, if not billions, to be able to sort of displace them. And so that really is the goal of every single stablecoin project, is how do we get to that level of scalability? So our view is, being a closed loop payment network design, the fees that are generated, and the more that people use the network, the more value is created, and that essentially creates an increase in the value of the collateral tokens. So because the collateral tokens, the Havven token value of the network, as that value grows, you can issue more circulating currency against it, more NUSD. The challenge that Maker has had, and what they've been trying to deal with, has been that there's just a finite number of people who are willing to lock up ETH to issue DAI against it. Whereas in our system, you're participating in the network, you're buying Havven tokens, or you're holding Havven tokens purely to participate. There's no other sort of use case for it. So our view is that will allow us to scale the network much faster. And once we can demonstrate to various participants in the ecosystem that we've got that scalability, that transaction volume is growing, it'll make it much easier for adoption, because people are looking for this decentralized solution, but right now there isn't anything that's out there that can sort of credibly say we're the one.
Very cool. And of course, as the value of Havven continues to increase over time, that fee that Havven holders are getting will, of course, increase as well. So it's a very compelling model that Havven's offering, and that's why when I first read about you guys, I thought, wow, this is so interesting, actually. And of course, the more competition, the better in this space, without a doubt. Now, you're starting off with the NUSD. How long until we see the New Zealand nomin, or the Australian nomin, the New Zealand
Yeah.
nomin?
Absolutely, absolutely. So NUSD obviously makes a lot of sense. The US dollar is sort of the reserve currency of the world. Most of the trading activity occurs under USD pairs. But the good thing about our model is, given that the Havven token can be measured in any essentially any arbitrary currency, any fiat currency, we can release, and are planning to later in the year, probably a euro, a Korean won version of nomins, Australian dollar, New Zealand dollar, various other currencies that obviously have a lot of trading volume.
Mm-hmm.
And we think that that'll be very beneficial for a couple of reasons. One, it'll allow people in those local markets to trade on their local exchanges. And two, it'll allow them to transfer value from their local markets into international markets. So, for example, if you're in New Zealand and you want to deposit money into Binance, right now you've got to go through Bitcoin or ETH. You're going to pay transaction fees. You're going to pay a large spread. There's all of these things that add up just to get your money into Binance or KuCoin or Huobi or whoever you want to trade in, and that becomes expensive. So our view is that if we can make it very easy for people to purchase an NZD, they can then transfer it fairly cheaply into their exchange of choice and not have to pay all of those fees and spreads and various other things.
What's the response been from exchanges as far as actually listing nomins?
Obviously, exchanges are interested in a decentralized stablecoin, but the challenge is you need to demonstrate that you are credible. We understand that. We need to demonstrate that we've got scalability. Even DAI, obviously, that's a very old, Maker is a very old project. They've struggled to get listed anywhere other than, a few decentralized exchanges, because there's just not enough circulating currency to support even one of the, second or third tier exchanges. The transaction volume that they generate on a daily basis is so high. You need, again, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of circulating currency to support that. So once we scale up to that level, I think it'll be far, far easier. But obviously, we're having those conversations now to try and smooth the road.
Yeah, awesome. Very cool. Now, we talked about fiat currency nomins. What about, for example,
Yep.
gold or diamonds or silver? Could that be a possibility?
It is possible. It does become harder, because in order for the mechanism to work, we need an oracle that can measure havens against those commodities, if you will. So, one of the things that we've looked at is to potentially, create like a consumer price index tracking token. But again, we need someone to have already created a CPI basket that can be traded against Havens or ETH or some other cryptocurrency, which right now, as far as I'm aware, is sort of not there yet. So once that's available and once exchanges are supporting that, then we'll be able to do some interesting stuff. But at the moment, that's kind of a bridge too far.
Fair enough. Something for another day, perhaps. I think just starting with
Absolutely,
the NUSD, that's a great place to start without a doubt, because more stable
for
coins are
sure.
definitely needed in the market. I think it's a real demand for it at the moment, as people do have concerns about Tether for one reason or another, and so the
hmm
more competition, the better. And a healthy market should have that competition in it. Now, the Haven eStore, what's up with that? What can we find there?
So at the moment, you've got a bunch of Haven merch. So if you want a Haven hoodie or a shirt or whatever, you can buy that. We've also partnered with a company in the US to be able to distribute Apple products. So I come from an e-commerce background. I've run e-commerce stores as well as offline retail stores. And one area of online retail that people often miss is the level of fraud. If you're a good actor, if you're a normal customer, you don't realize how much fraud there is and how much of a cost you actually bear for that fraud. Because what happens when a transaction goes wrong is it's charged to the merchant. So if
Mm-hmm.
someone creates a fraudulent credit card transaction, an online merchant, they send them an iPhone or a MacBook or something like that. That cost is passed back via the merchant's bank. And obviously, where does it go? It goes straight back to consumers who are purchasing. It needs to be built into the pricing. So something that we believe cryptocurrency will be able to, and people have been saying this for a long time. I'm not the first person to say this. If merchants were paying with cryptocurrency, you get rid of the risk of fraud because it's a non-custodial solution. Once the money is transferred between you and your favorite merchant, the merchant has the money. There's no intermediary. There's no central, authority who's administering those transactions who can
Mm-hmm.
reverse them. Transactional immutability is a really powerful sort of aspect for online commerce. The problem is that right now no one wants to spend Bitcoin and no one wants to spend Ether because they're sort of appreciating in price, right? Even
That's
though
it.
ups and downs. And if you're a merchant, you definitely don't want to accept it because there's going to be price risk, exchange rate risk, on your side as well. So if you pay, in Bitcoin and the price drops, then that merchant might be not able to even cover the cost of the goods they sold you. So what we will allow them to do is to accept a stable cryptocurrency that they don't need to worry about the exchange rate risk, and that will take out a whole bunch of hidden costs that exist in the ecosystem. So what we're trying to demonstrate by this Apple product launch that we're doing is that we can actually ship products. You could pay with cryptocurrency right now and give us just an email address. We wouldn't need to check your ID. We wouldn't need to check
Mm-hmm.
your address or anything like that. We could ship it to a street corner. You just name a street corner. We could ship it there, and you could be waiting there, pick it up, and there's no risk of fraud whatsoever. Which is extremely powerful for e-commerce. So that's something that we want to be able to demonstrate, and that's why we've built this e-store as a proof of concept.
That's great. And I imagine that as we see more DEX functionality coming on board, it'll be very easy for merchants to accept any cryptocurrency, essentially, particularly Ethereum or Ethereum backed tokens, and have that paid out immediately in nomins to them so that they don't have to worry
Absolutely.
about the price fluctuations. They can, yeah, you can pay in Ethereum and we receive a US dollar backed value. Like you said,
Absolutely.
that's
That's
very
exactly right.
powerful for merchants. Very, very
Yep.
interesting indeed. Now, what about the launch? How's that forming up?
So the launch of the store has gone very well. We've got a competition that's running at the moment. So anyone who purchases through the store, it goes in the draw to win 5,000 EUSD, which is our ETH-backed stablecoin, the provisional stablecoin. But in terms of the launch of NUSD on the 11th of June, we've just gone through the first round of code audits. So we have two really great auditors who are working on the project at the moment, Blockstacks and Sigma Prime. Sigma Prime are in Australia and Blockstacks are US based. They actually just audited Zeppelin OS. So they're super super amazing guys. We really respect them a lot. So they've just gone through the first round of audits. Nothing major found. So we're still on track for the 11th of June, which is going to be very exciting because once we can get on mainnet and can start demonstrating the scalability, it's going to be, in our opinion, a game changer. It'll be the first scalable decentralized stablecoin we've got on the Ethereum mainnet.
Wow, that's really exciting, and it definitely
It
can't
is.
come soon enough.
It
And of
is.
course, it's only a few weeks away, so that's really great. And I think once more people start finding out about Haven, and of course the ability to be, holding sort of the dividend tokens, if you will, and getting those exchange fees coming back to them as the network grows, that could be a very, very powerful and alluring option for people to get into. Now, the final question I want to ask to you today is kind of a little more general. What's the crypto scene like in Australia? How do you see it developing? What's your kind of thoughts on it?
Well, actually, funnily enough, I'm in Paris at the moment. It's
Oh,
2 a.m. So,
well, thanks for
so
being
I'm
up in the
not.
middle of the night to talk to us. It's
Yeah, of
great.
course, of course. No, we were supposed to be back in Sydney, but I ended up being in Paris for a few days. There's a team here called Tether that we work with, so I'm gonna meet up with those guys. But the scene in Australia and I guess Sydney specifically is growing rapidly. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of projects starting to sort of gain some momentum and start to get exposure. One of the challenges, though, I'm sure as you know, is getting exposure overseas in those larger markets,
Hmm.
Europe, US, Asia, can be quite challenging. So for us, we've spent a lot of time, again in Paris and just been in New York and San Francisco and Singapore. We spent a lot of time on the road, a lot of time traveling, and I think that's something that for most of the Australian projects is going to be pretty critical. But I think hopefully what we'll see over the next 6 to 12 months is more successful projects, more successful founders who can then act as mentors. Because one of the challenges that we've had in Sydney over the last, say, 20 years is that a lot of our most successful founders leave. They go to San
Mm.
Francisco or they move to London or whatever. So we don't have that same ecosystem, unfortunately, as you find in, say, San Francisco or some of the larger markets. And so I'm hoping that crypto will give people in Sydney the ability to stay in Sydney and grow their project or grow their business, whatever they're doing, and that will create an ecosystem that can really support some of the upcoming projects, which will then create that critical mass and build up the network effects. It's just starting now, and I'm very hopeful that that will be something that we'll see over the next year or so. But obviously, we all have to work together to support that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, you're gonna be one of the mentors. People are gonna be coming to you in a
Hopefully,
couple of years saying,
hopefully.
"Kane, you did this amazing Having thing. Tell us, we need advice on how to start our crypto project." So that's awesome. It all starts with one person, one team can have so much impact. So I really like the way you're thinking. I think that's really, really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, we want projects to build on top of Haven. Haven's a protocol. So if there's a project out there, whether they're in Sydney or anywhere, feel free to reach out to us. We've got some great partners already. But if you're looking to build a new project and you don't want to roll your own medium of exchange, we're here to help you with that.
Awesome. Kane, this has been a really interesting chat. Stablecoins are definitely one of the hot topics at the moment. So I think you guys, we're all looking forward to that June 11th launch to see the NUSD coming out. So thanks for sitting down and talking to us today.
Of course. Thank you so much. Thanks for making the time.